right? So therefore you have to simply prepare the whole syllabus, right? There are no shortcuts to success, and definitely not in UPSC. Civil servant क्या है? Civil service क्या है? Civil service is the apparatus, or civil service is the tool, merit based selection and the organizational structure of the civil services. So colonial mentality na hona, Brown Sahib na hona, this was one of the major focus of the extremist leaders like Lal Balapal, Shri Aurobindo. Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose already rank 4, joined, probation may resigned, right? So you have clear structure with you. This is what you call as, social or political. This is what you call as economic. This is what you call as security. So therefore, only those students will be able to answer who have done research on the basis of current affairs. Obviously, if governance provider and governance recipient, if they speak the same language, then efficiency will be there. That is good governance.
Congratulations on clearing UPSC 2024. Watching you succeed is really inspiring.
Thanks. I have been in your shoes. I know how overwhelming the start feels.
Exactly. There's so much to cover, I don't even know where to begin.
I felt the same. That's why I joined the GS Foundation course by Vision Eyes, which offers structured classes, expert faculty, and regular revision. It gave me clarity and momentum.
And you stayed consistent with it?
Yes, I followed the complete roadmap offered by the course. If you're aiming for 2026, start with this course. It offers you holistic coverage with every stage of the exam covered seamlessly. This is where your journey will truly begin.
Got it. I will definitely explore the course. Where can I find the details?
Just visit their website or call on the given numbers.
Morning everyone. So we are here to discuss the GS1, and we are going to start with MIH, World History and Post-Independence India, right? So as is the pattern, roughly 4 to 5 questions are asked every year jointly from these 3 subjects, right? And whenever you feel that world history is not important, they'll ask 2 questions from it. Whenever you feel post-independence India is not important, they'll ask 2 questions from it. And whenever you feel that only modern Indian history is important, they'll ask only 1 question from it. Example, this time. Right, or 1 or 2 questions you can say at max, right? So therefore you have to simply prepare the whole syllabus, right? There are no shortcuts to success, and definitely not in UPSC. The first question that we are going to, we had some trouble classifying it because by default it seems like a ethics question, whereby question number 9 it said, the ethos of civil services in India stands for 2 things: professionalism and nationalist consciousness. Stands for professionalism with nationalist consciousness. And you have to elucidate, that is, you don't have to like question the statement, you have to simply elaborate the statement with examples if possible, right? So therefore that is the question, and you have to answer in 150 words. Now, how to think about this question? We are talking about we are talking about GS paper 1, right? So therefore, one thing which comes into our mind with respect to, now we are thinking, we are in the exam, we are thinking that ये तो ethics types question लग रहा है, right? So the first thought that will come to our mind, but we are in GS1. So because of the nationalist consciousness, maybe we can think about modern Indian history because we discussed the Indian national movement in MIH, right? Or because the word here is stands for, that means it is not the past, it is somewhat the present, right? Then maybe we can classify it as part of post-independence India, right? Or at max we can think about maybe society, right? But society, civil services, thoda sa match nahi karta. Society usually, may not have stress upon the theme of nationalism, because society more or less focus on the components of the nation, that is women issues, lower caste issues and language issues, rather than the group as a whole, right? So therefore, maybe fine, in the exam I take a call that maybe I have to go for a middle path, that is a combination of modern Indian history, that is MIH, and post independence India, right? Some kind of middle path. I'm not going to take very purely a historical perspective because of the word stands for, which is like present tense, right? And neither I'm going to be, totally make history absent, right? And maybe I can have a middle path between the two, right? So something like this I can think of, right? How to begin? What can be the introduction? The first thought process comes is like, for example, in our classes, right? I constantly highlight this particular thing, that as a bureaucrat, what you are is, you are basically trying to get the job in the executive branch of the state. What is the state structure? You have symbolic sovereign, and then you have legislature, executive, judiciary. What is executive? It is ministers and civil servants with military servants, right? You're trying for civil services, right? So you're trying to get into the executive branch of the state, and the state is nation state, right? And every state has territory motive, right? Nation state also definitely has people's motive. And what is people? People is nation, right? So maybe from that I can come out with an introduction that India is a nation state, right? And civil servant kya hai? Civil service kya hai? Civil service is the apparatus, or civil service is the tool, right, which is deployed to achieve the objectives and implement the policies of this nation state, right? This can be your introduction, right? That is a clear understanding of what is civil service. And obviously apparatus or the tool needs to be sharp, which hints at the word professionalism. And because you have already mentioned nation state, right, and its objectives, so nationalist consciousness has to be present. So therefore your introduction is totally in line with the question statement, right? So therefore you say India is a nation state, plus you mention that civil service is equal to apparatus. For what? For basically the objectives of the nation state, that is implementing objectives and implementing the policies of the nation state, right? So therefore this is a very valid introduction, right, which I could think of. There can be n number of examples of the introduction, right? So therefore we have clearly told the examiner that we know what the question is, right? Then when you come to the body part, right, so we can structure obviously our question has two elements, professionalism and nationalist consciousness, right? So let's begin with professionalism. You can come up with any English language to kind of like in one sentence say that following are the ethos are based in professionalism as, and then you can write down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Or you can come out with some paragraph about the points that we are talking about, right? So if we begin with the history, so professionalism was ensured during the British time period itself. Professionalism was ensured during the British time period itself. For example, you can mention that Cornwallis 8693, that is 1786-93, right? He ensured, he is called what you call as father of civil services, or he initiated civil services, right? And he focused on professionalism. मैं थोड़ा ज़्यादा बोल रहा हूँ, इतना लिखेंगे नहीं एग्जाम में, because we have only 150 words, right? So, but मैं आपको समझाने के लिए बता रहा हूँ that Cornwallis is called father of civil services, and he was very honest person, and he ensured that there is professional recruitment of the civil servants. For example, he will not take any nepotic or nepotism based recommendations from the board of directors, right, in London, right? So he did not introduce the proper exam, which was introduced in 1853, but he definitely ensured that there is meritorious recruitment of the British civil servants serving in India. Okay, so therefore you can mention Cornwallis 8693, his focus on professionalism. How? Via two things. One thing is, that is merit-based selection. And second thing is, professionalism is being also more organized. When you say someone is a professional, then you are imagining a person who is emotionless kind of person, right? Who is acting like a machine. When you say someone is a professional, a doctor, well, he's a professional, right? Totally emotionless, right? Even if 20 pegs down like Kabir Singh, professional. That is the thought process. And see, he organized the officers. Into a service. That is a proper organization, right? Proper organization, organize the services into covenanted civil services and uncovenanted civil services. इतना लिखने की जरूरत नहीं है, इसको shrink करेंगे. And what you can say is that Cornwallis 8693 or Cornwallis 1786-93, the father of civil services, ensured merit-based selection and organized bureaucrats professionally into covenanted and uncovenanted civil services, right? So therefore 1 point done. Okay, then second point that you can talk about is that the Charter 1853 introduced exam, right? So therefore exam ensures what? That there is merit based selection, right? That there is professionalism which is there, right? Third element that you can highlight is that you can say that the exam, it began in 1853. For the first time the exam took place in India in 1922. Right. Third point with respect to professionalism that you can highlight is, as I told you, that professionalism is also about organization. Therefore, you can mention that initially there was covenanted civil services. In early 1900s, you don't have to have that knowledge. Exam में याद आ जाए तो अच्छा है, नहीं याद आता तो भी अच्छा है. ली कमीशन था एक, ठीक है, बट ठीक है, इतना अगर याद नहीं है ना, एटलीस्ट दिस प्रिंसिपल शुड बी रिमेंबर्ड दैट इन अर्ली 1900s this civil services was organized into all India services and what you call as central civil services. The kind of structure that we have today, IAS, IPS and Indian Forest Services are all India services, whereas the IRS, IFS and other services, they are central civil services, right? So therefore professional organization, it is there. And also there was what you call as PCS, that is provincial civil services, right? So therefore by, you can say, ज़्यादा detail में भी नहीं जाना है और क्योंकि content और भी करना है, we don't have to get over focused on history. So simplify things, but let's mention the core, that it began as a covenanted civil services and uncovenanted civil services, right? But by 20th century, they were very professionally organized into all India services, central civil services and provincial civil services, right? Ensuring focus on good governance. तो good governance अंग्रेज तो क्या ही करेंगे, मतलब ठीक है good governance था, but colonial good governance ऐसा कह सकते हैं. Ensuring efficiency, right, in the civil services, right? That's how you can talk about it, right? So that is what is there. Now quickly we come towards post independence era. So you can say that post independence, what determines, right? So therefore post independence we have continued with merit based selection, right? Further you can mention that the training is very professional, right? And training is at the beginning. Training is also mid-career training, and training gives you wide exposure including international exposure, right? So that the bureaucrats, they continue to be very, very efficient, right? You can further sum it up like simple structure ये ना language आप जो भी use करें, ठीक है? This ensures what you call as professionals, right? Plus once this training is done, or this is a continuous training actually, so therefore you have all India service rules, right? All India Service Conduct Rules or Central Civil Services Conduct Rules. So this ensures that the conduct of the bureaucrats, it remains totally in line with the professional ethics, right? So therefore that is how it is. Then you can further mention that professionalism is also ensured. Motivation is very important part for any professional, right? So therefore you can talk about, मतलब इसको mention करना है करिए, नहीं करना छोड़ भी सकते हैं, but I thought that motivation can be a thing which can be added. So therefore you can talk about Civil Services Award. Right, through Civil Services Awards, right, the best practices are highlighted, right, throughout the country, and those who are responsible for the best practices, they are rewarded through Civil Services Awards, right? So therefore that is how it is. And lastly you can mention, और उसको यहीं पे mention कर सकते थे, that All India Services Rules or Code of Conduct Rules, they ensure that the bureaucrats, they remain professionals and they remain apolitical. They remain apolitical in nature, right? That is ensured through the conduct rules, right? So therefore what is the professional? Professional, I told you, non-emotional kind of person. Therefore there comes what you call as, not totally non-emotional because that nationalist consciousness is there, but otherwise apolitical and a thorough professional. Now if you look at this, what have we done? अब इसमें से you don't have to write everything, you can pick and choose because you have a words constraint, right? And we have to be very concerned that the question has two parts. We should not end up eating most of the words in the first part itself, right? So maybe in the exam, because the question is kind of like tough question, right? From the GS1 perspective, अगर GS4 में आता तो ठीक है, आपने कहीं ना कहीं prepare कर रखा होगा. ये आपने structure बनाई, you made this structure. Now accordingly you decide कि अच्छा इसको किस तरीके से within the 50% of the space I have to ensure, right? Broad elements are there. Clear objectives, see broadly what is there. That this time period is British era and this time period is post-independence era. I told you let's follow a middle path between modern history and post-independence India. Broad structure is this. कि कुछ आप बताइए कि जो इसकी roots हैं, right? They began, the professionalism began in the British era itself, right? And it has continued and amended, right, after independence, right? So therefore these are the board two structures, right? And elements are merit-based selection and the organizational structure of the civil services. This is also organizational structure of the civil services, right? Once you get recruited, तो recruit हो गए, organizational structure बन गया. Once you have got recruited, then element of training and motivation come, right? So therefore that is also ensured, right? तो हमने कुछ बहुत बड़ी बात नहीं कही है, just that we have a structure in place and it can be converted into bullet points, right? Next what we have is, second element is nationalist consciousness. Now again, if you think about nationalist consciousness and you begin with the Indian national movement, the first point that you can talk about is that the INM leaders, or if you want to be specifically more particular than moderates, they always had this goal of Indianization of civil services, right? But the student who only talks about Indianization of civil services and gives out a perception that Indianization means only more number of Indians, right? But why? Why to have more number of Indians? The civil servants, they are not going to be, some lakhs of people in numbers, right? That the wider nation will benefit. Why to have more Indians? Because it is expected that if more Indians will be there, that these Indians are going to have love for their own people, love for their land, and therefore the way they implement the policies, right, that will be more humane, more pro people. They will not be taking random decisions, right? So nationalist consciousness is actually the reason that moderates, they wanted Indianization of the civil services. है ना? फायदा क्या हो गया मोर इंडियंस रख के, है ना? कोई ऐसा तो है नहीं कि सिविल सर्विस में बहुत ज़्यादा लाखों लोग हैं कि भाई मोर इंडियंस होंगे तो पता नहीं आम जनता को बड़ा फायदा हो जाएगा. आम जनता को फायदा होगा क्योंकि इफ मोर इंडियंस आर देयर देन इट इज एक्सपेक्टेड दैट दीज इंडियंस बिकॉज दे हैव स्टडीड वेस्टर्न एजुकेशन विच लीड्स टू नेशनलिस्ट कॉन्शियसनेस एंड देयरफॉर दीज इंडियंस विल हैव लव नॉट फॉर ब्रिटेन, they will have love for Indians, right? That is what the connection in this line is with nationalist consciousness, right? So therefore they wanted Indianization of civil services, and there you can mention not just more Indians, change the words. Usually people use the word public service, right? That spirit of public service should be there. But what is public? Public is people. What is people? People is masses. What is masses? Masses is nation. Nation is summation of people who are one, equal and supreme. Nation is people, right? So therefore you say, but the core is spirit of nations service. Kyun dala nations? Because we should always try to use such words which are part of the question. It tells the examiner कि हम भटके नहीं हैं. It tells the examiner that we are on the point. Right? And when you use the words which are part of the question, maybe the model answer which is available with the answer checker is slightly different, right? But he is an intellectual and therefore you can force him to take an alternate view. That see, this is also a point. I am answering the question only. I am answering the question only. I am answering the question only. So in every paragraph, in every sentence, if possible, right, we should use the words which are part of the question. Just so as to prove ki dekho this is also a perspective, right? So therefore that's how it leads to that's why I shifted the word public service towards nations service, because there is a nationalist consciousness kind of component is there. Now second component, if to think about the extremist leaders, what did they want? One of the primary goal of the extremist leaders was national education. Example you can mention. Example in Swadeshi, मतलब इतना time नहीं है हमारे पास क्योंकि 150 words ही, but मैं आपको verbally बता देता हूँ. Example in the Swadeshi movement, one of the key focus was nationalist education or Swadeshi education. Bengal National College was set up, right? Bengal Technical Institute was set up, right? A council for education was also set up which can design nationalist syllabus, right? तभी तो कर्जन ने कहा था that universities have become sedition factories. Right, Curzon, 1899-1905, his famous dialogue that universities have become factories of sedition. Sedition against a colonial state. That now nationalism is rising. Right, so extremist का इतना focus था on nationalist education that in the Calcutta session of 1906, 4 resolution was passed. One resolution was with respect to goal of Swaraj. Second resolution was boycott. That method should be boycott. Third resolution was we should promote Swadeshi. Now Swadeshi education or national education is part of Swadeshi, but they separately also, fourth resolution was promote nationalistic education or national education, right? So colonial mentality na hona, Brown Sahib na hona, this was one of the major focus of the extremist leaders like Lal Balpal, Shri Aurobindo, right? So therefore extremist leaders ka bhi focus hai. Then you can mention the in the spirit of the nationalist consciousness, in the spirit ऐसा आप language use करेंगे, ठीक है ना, वही word use करना है. In the spirit of the nationalist consciousness, leaders like Aurobindo and Netaji Bose rejected colonial civil service. Right? See, या तो वही वर्ड इस्तेमाल करना है या उसका विपरीत वर्ड इस्तेमाल करना है. Either use the word nationalism or nationalist consciousness or the opposite of it, that is colonialism or colonial CS. है ना? तो देखो नेताजी सुभाष चंद्र बोस ऑल इंडिया रैंक 4 joined, probation में resigned, right? Shri Aurobindo cleared the exam, deliberately did not go for horse riding test, है ना? So therefore why? Because they said that this civil service, it is being used against the spirit of nationalism, against the spirit of nationalist consciousness. We are nationalist, we are having nationalist consciousness, we are not going to join colonial civil service because right now this apparatus is helping the British. राइट ये मैंने आपको वर्बली आई हैव टोल्ड यू मोर, एग्जाम में इतना सब नहीं लिखेंगे, एग्जाम में आप सिंपली इतना लिख सकते हैं दैट औरोबिंदो एंड नेताजी बोस रिजेक्टेड colonial civil services, rejected colonial civil services. Why? Because of nationalist, this thing. Lastly, you can, another thing that you can mention, that role in INA agitations. INA agitations were the first ones which took place in 1945, last of 1945 and early part of 1946. That when INA trials took place, money was, crowdfunding was done, so that court cases can be fought, so that rehabilitation of the INA men can be done. For the first time, the civil servants, right, group A, group B, group C, publicly contributed money for relief for INA men, right? And therefore you can mention that the civil servants, right, especially that is the Indian civil servants, wo achute nahi rahe, they were also impacted by the Indian national movement. And proof is that how, publicly they are contributing funds from their own salaries for the relief to the INA men, right? So therefore that is how you can mention, right? Then if I talk about post independence, so post independence, you can mention that, for example, today also, if you talk about the syllabus, you talk about the syllabus at school level, at college level, and also you talk about the syllabus of the exam, right? The syllabus of the exam is what you call as dedicated to constitutional values, nationalist consciousness, and third element is obviously promoting merit based selection, right? So therefore today's syllabus, not just of the UPSC exam which leads to recruitment of the civil servants, not just the SSC exam which leads to recruitment of the civil servants, not just the state PCS exam, but from the beginning itself we have a national education, right? We are not creating brown sahibs, at least that is the intent, right? So today's syllabus at school level, college level or exam level is motivated by, especially for a bureaucrat, आप भी जानते हो कि कितनी rigorous training होती है in your laws, in your rules, in your constitutional values, right, during the UPSC preparation, right? And obviously nationalism is there, right, through subjects like modern Indian history and other things, and merit. मतलब एग्जाम में तो इतना ही बस लिखना है, that today also the syllabus at school, college and exam level is motivated or inspired by the values in the constitution, right, comma nationalism, and with focus on merit based selection, right? तो इस तरीके से आप लिख सकते हैं कि आज के समय पे भी national education है. And what is the core motivation of civil servant? Does entry into the civil services leads you to very high salary? No. Two core motivations are there. A, job security, उसको अच्छा कह सकते हैं, that is the assured career, right? That is, core motivation is a professional career, ठीक है? So that's how you can use the word professional career. It's not like ad hoc recruitment, okay? You're looking for professional career, right? And second core motivation is what? To do public service. These are the core motivation of any bureaucrat, है ना? ये कह रहे हैं मेरा तो भोकाल है, भोकाल वोकाल भी रहने दो, ठीक है? Public service and sense of service to the nation state, right? And professional career. Lastly, you can come towards examples. इसमें से इतना लिखना है या थोड़ा सा कम लिखना है, ठीक है? मे बी प्री इंडिपेंडेंस का पार्ट हल्का आप कम कर सकते हैं. अल्टीमेटली इट डिपेंड्स कि अच्छा 150 वर्ड्स में हम किस तरीके से चल रहे हैं, ठीक है? बट बैलेंस हैज टू बी देयर बिटवीन पॉइंट नंबर 3 एंड पॉइंट नंबर 2. This is point number 3 and that was point number 2. A balance has to be there between both of them, right? And lastly, you can mention examples. And you can begin with post-independence in India, right? And you can mention that when it came to rehabilitation, post-partition, implementation of land reforms, implementation of pro-people policies like tribal integration, implementation of economic reforms, like Green Revolution, 1967-77, LPG, 1991, LPG 1991 पे you can allocate some words also, because LPG 1991 is hurting the selfish interest of the bureaucrats, but still in the national interest they are the implementers of the LPG reforms, because when LPG was not there, so therefore bureaucrats, they used to be in very strong positions in the PSUs, right? So therefore you are moving towards what? You are moving towards what you call as, you are hurting your own selfish interest. Why? In the larger national interest, and for that nationalist consciousness is very, very important. Okay? So therefore LPG reforms, but they are still implemented. In today's time, for example, GST reforms, right? For example, ये तो मैंने खुद किया हुआ है. For example, when transition was taking place from the previous tax regime to the new tax regime, so therefore my service officer, they were pressed into service. We went through all over India, right? Held so many meetings with the business people, right? Answered so many of their questions, that this is how you have to fill the form, this is how you have to do this, this is how you have to do this, right? So therefore huge amount of outreach was done, right? Who am I? I was civil servant, right? So therefore I felt that is the same thing, right? GST reforms, iska economic reforms mein iska implementation hai, right? Otherwise, and third thing, very good thing, without security there cannot be any development. Common man will not be able to have any kind of economic security or socio-cultural security if there is not national security, and IPS officers are also civil servants, right? So therefore we should not just focus on the non-IPS side of the things, we should also focus on the IPS side of things, because they are also civil servants, and therefore you can mention that national security, right? So therefore it is the civil servants who serve as the backbone of the national security against the threats of terrorism and Naxalism, right? IPS officers, they do get posted to CAPF, right? Paramilitary forces also, right? So therefore that's how you can mention the different this thing. If you have some names in your mind, for example, Sardar Trilok Singh, right? He was the key person with respect to rehabilitation post partition, right? Or you have some other examples we have jotted down, right, in your maybe from civil services awards, etc. Then you can note those things down, right? मतलब इसके अंदर डालना एक आधा नाम तो डाल सकते हैं, right? But otherwise overall this is the structure that, so you have clear structure with you. This is what you call as social or political, this is what you call as economic, this is what you call as security, right? So therefore that's how you can answer this particular question. ठीक है, मतलब मेरा ये perspective था that a combination of post independence and modern Indian history से this particular question has been asked, if it has been asked in the GS1, right? So therefore that is how it is. You can mention schemes, बहुत सारे इसमें ऐसे लिखा जा सकता है, कौन सब कुछ कौन implement करता है, आप ही लोग तो implement करते हो, है ना? नेशन के अंदर masses are poor, so MG Narega is for the poor. Who implements MG Narega? Right? Disaster management, right? Who implemented, for example, rehabilitation after, let's say, reconstruction after Gujarat earthquake in 2001, right? Or for example, in Odisha, though it is continuous work of what you call as rehabilitation, because cyclones they strike, right? So basically, whatever the state does, it does with you people, with the help of you on the ground, right? But एग्जाम्पल्स बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं देने थे, कॉन्शियसनेस है, सोच है, उस पर थोड़ा फोकस करना था, तो मैं सोचा कि वो सोच INM से निकल सकती है, दैट राइट. एंड सेकंड इट कैन, तो इस वजह से मैंने एग्जाम्पल्स पे बहुत ज़्यादा टाइम नहीं दिया. मैंने जो कॉन्शियसनेस की बात करी ना उन्होंने, ठीक है ना, उन्होंने ये नहीं कहा कि भाई मतलब इम्प्लीमेंटेशन की बात कम है इन द क्वेश्चन, इट इज़ मोर अबाउट कॉन्शियसनेस. दैट्स व्हाई आई स्ट्रक्चर्ड द आंसर लाइक दिस, राइट. सो एग्जाम्पल्स आर देयर, वी हैव फोकस ऑन नेशनलिस्ट कॉन्शियसनेस एंड वी हैव फोकस ऑन प्रोफेशनलिज्म एंड वी हैव एन इंट्रोडक्शन, राइट. सो देयरफॉर कंक्लूजन कुछ भी आप लिख लेना, मतलब कंक्लूजन तो ठीक है वो उसी में ही हो गया कंक्लूजन, एग्जांपल्स आर कंक्लूजन ओनली, ठीक है, टाइम स्पेस बचेगा नहीं. नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन दैट वी हैव इज क्वेश्चन नंबर 11, एंड क्वेश्चन नंबर 11 इज महात्मा ज्योतिराव फुले's writings and efforts. Phule's writings and efforts of social reforms touched issues of almost all subaltern classes. Touched issue, मैं repeat करता हूँ verbally, महात्मा ज्योतिराव फुले's writings and efforts of social reforms touched issues of almost all subaltern classes. Subaltern classes discuss, and this has to be discussed in 250 words. right? So why this question comes? First of all, any one of you, पता नहीं देखा नहीं होगा, but just in case, any one of you has watched the video which we released before the exam, right? There I had clearly requested that please focus on social reforms, right? The reason was that social reforms is a very, very important thing, right? And it has been 2-3 years since they have asked any question on social reforms. तो मैंने कहा this can get repeated, right? इसी वजह से मैं कहता हूँ कि last 3 years of कोई फायदा नहीं होता है, right? मतलब psychology देखो ना, it's like game of chess, right? Everyone is looking at the past 3 years of questions, right? If you are examination question paper designer, why should you ideally repeat? Repeat नहीं हो सकता. Why should you ideally repeat when so much is to ask? Why should you ideally repeat anything which you have already asked very, very recently? And every coaching institute has conducted videos on it, right? UPSC does not want rote learners, right? So therefore, that's why I felt that the question will come from social reform, and ठीक है, एक question it came from social reform. But the interesting thing is that Mahatma Jyotirao Phule and his wife Savitribai Phule's efforts, they are not made a significant part of any book. So from where this particular question come, right? It simply came from current affairs. In the Independence Day speech, the Honorable Prime Minister declared that 200th anniversary of Jyotirao Phule will be celebrated. Plus, Maharashtra Assembly in April 2025 suggested that Bharat Ratna should be given to husband-wife duo, that is Jyotirao Phule and Savitribai Phule, right? So therefore, current affairs magazines must have published things about, Jyotirao Phule's effort, right? So UPSC does not want rote learners, right? UPSC is like कि every modern history student is doing, Swami Dayanand Saraswati, वो सब तो करना ही है ना? इसके बारे में किसने सोचा, right? So they asked. And this is the thing which I highlight in the class also, right? That static and current, and there is current in what you call as modern Indian history also, right? As simple as that, right? So, khair, next question that comes to mind is, what do you mean by subaltern classes? Subaltern classes basically means common people. What is subaltern history? अभी ठीक है, यूपीएससी को ऐसा वर्ड नहीं इस्तेमाल करना चाहिए था मेरे हिसाब से, बिकॉज द स्टूडेंट ऑफ जीएस मे नॉट बी अवेयर अबाउट सच अ वर्ड सबाल्टर्न, राइट? इस टाइप के वर्ड्स यूजुअली ऑप्शनल लेवल के स्टूडेंट्स पढ़ते हैं, ठीक है? दैट्स वाई ऐसे कि ये कहने वाली बातें है ना, कि कॉलेज लेवल नहीं, वो हर जगह कॉलेज लेवल पूछते हैं, ठीक है? जीएस में भी वो बीए लेवल का पूछ लेते हैं, है ना? और ऑप्शनल में तो मुझे लगता है कि एमए लेवल का पूछ लेते हैं, ठीक है ना? ये कहने वाली बातें हैं कि खाली एनसीईआरटी से हो जाए, बट ठीक है यार. Subaltern means common people. When you say subaltern history, that is the view of history from the perspective of common person. So imagine that there is a peasant, right? And Babur 2630, that is 1526-30, is defeating Ibrahim Lodi. तो इस peasant का क्या सोचना है? How his life is getting impacted, right? From his view, how things are there. That is called subaltern history. Usually the standard history is from the perspective of the state, top, right? From the perspective of the ruler. Right, this is subaltern history. Subaltern classes therefore basically means these are subaltern classes, right? Professionally, working class, artisan class, peasantry class, right? Then gender wise women, right? Caste wise Dalits, religion wise minorities and majorities, linguistic groups, language wise, right? And children, right? So therefore these are the subaltern classes. So basically all नहीं, most का UPSC ने कहा है कि work for nearly all or subaltern classes, right? So basically इनके इसमें टफ बात यही है कि आपको जो writings है, there the factual information would have to be added. Effort जो है, तो efforts, so I told you, right? Educated Italian Prime Minister in Calcutta for pre-polls. In the exam, if you are answering about social reforms, by chance कुछ याद नहीं आ रहा, तो बस ये याद करो कि imagine करो कि बंगाल में election हो रहे हैं and Italian Prime Minister has come for campaign, pre-poll campaign. Educated, Western education. Italian I, उससे क्या था? Idolatry, right? I say idolatry. right? P say priestcraft, M say marriage, child marriage, widow remarriage, right? Italian educated Italian prime minister in infanticide, right? Calcutta C casteism, right? For pre-polls, P polygamy, another P polytheism, right? Okay, so these are the social reforms which are there, right? तो बेसिकली जनरली इफ एनी स्टूडेंट हैज स्टडीड तो क्या क्या करना होता है इन केसेस में वही है, ठीक है ना? तो उसमें कुछ वो मतलब दैट्स स्टैंडर्ड, ठीक है ना? वही काम होगा, ठीक है? तो की थिंग हेयर द डिफरेंशिएटिंग फैक्टर विल बिकम फैक्ट्स, राइट? जस्ट इन केस इफ यू हैव नॉट स्टडीड अबाउट ज्योतिराव फुले, राइट, बहुत ज़्यादा डिटेल में, ठीक है, some rough idea that you have that he was from Maharashtra, that he was from Mali caste, that he along with his wife worked for something, इतना भी है अगर, and if you know the meaning of subaltern classes, then also you can come up with an answer, but आपके आंसर में फिर ये वाले facts नहीं होंगे, ठीक है? तो ठीक है, तब भी कुछ ना कुछ attempt किया जा सकता है इसमें, right? So why this question gave, I told you. इंट्रोडक्शन में व्हाट यू कैन मेंशन इज कि ये नॉलेज का ही पार्ट है दैट ज्योतिराव फुले वाज नॉट अ ग्रेजुअलिस्ट, ही वाज व्हाट यू कॉल एज ही वांटेड रैडिकल सोशल रिफॉर्म्स. So he did not want holy reforms, he wanted radical social reforms, right? In fact, some sources they call him father of Indian social revolution also. Like Raja Ram Mohan Roy is called father of modern India, that is with him began the social reforms, but he was holy reformer, gradualist reformer, right? Radical social reforms, so Jyotirao Phule is called father of Indian social revolution, initiator, right? Initiator. Why? Because Arya Samaj was set up in 1875, whereas Jyotirao Phule is active roughly a decade before that also, right? Arya Samaj, Swami Vivekananda, they also wanted radical social reforms, right? Keshav Chandra Sen, he is also active in 1860s, so maybe KCS, Keshav Chandra Sen, can have some competition with Jyotirao Phule, but fine, the title is given to Jyotirao Phule, right? So introduction mein what you can mention is that he wanted radical social reforms. And then you can mention with focus on all subaltern classes, like he raised issues of workers, women, children, right, peasants, etc. That can be introduction, right? As simple as that, right? Second element that comes into operation is we can begin with, for example, education. For example, he gave suggestions to Hunter Education Commission. And what were his suggestions? So his suggestions were that they should be, so he gave suggestions and some of them were accepted. So इनका फोकस, इन सजेशंस इनके थे that there should be universal education, example सर्व शिक्षा अभियान type, that is every mass education. Focus should be on primary education, that is rather than spending money on higher education, try to have basic literacy among the masses, right? Primary education. Practical education means it is in line with Mahatma Gandhi's principle, right? That is the utility should be there, that focus on vocation should be there, that after going to school my child will be able to have gainful employment, right? Maybe at 14 years of age itself, that is after class 8th itself, right? So focus on practical education. Then because the private sector is not very strong, right? So therefore the state funded education should be there, plus the government should also run, that is government should give jobs to the teachers, etc. So state funded and state run education should be there. Focus on female education, that was a suggestion by Jyotirao Phule. Focus on vernaculars, right? That is education should be in the mother tongue for better effectiveness or utilitarianist principles, right? Which of the suggestions were accepted? Well, not universal, but yes, the Hunter Education Commission did ask to focus on primary education, did ask to promote vocational education, did talk about vernacular languages, that is focus should be mass education, mass primary education in vernaculars with special focus on females, especially outside Madras, Bombay, Calcutta. ऐसा मतलब उन्होंने कहा था. तो if you have some knowledge of this, then you can add it. Then second, if I talk about women, so the first female school, right, it was set up in India, in Pune, with him and his wife, right. His wife was the first female teacher, right, Savitri Bai Phule, and that was done in 1848. Right, first female school, right? So he promoted what you call as female education. Apart from this, what are the issues of women, right? So one of the issue, as I told you, widow remarriage, child marriage, female infanticide. These are the three issues which are pertaining to women, right? So with respect to, for example, life cycle approach लेते हैं. Right, so infanticide prevention center was set up by him in 1863. Right, focus basically क्या था? तो focus is obviously to provide focus is obviously girl child. Child from socially illegitimate circumstances, right? For example, let's say any rape victim is there, right, who is now pregnant, right? So therefore, female infanticide center, that is, such advertisements were given that anonymity will be ensured and in a very safe environment the birth will be done. Please do not kill the child, right? We are infanticide में भ्रूण हत्या ना करें, and therefore safety will be there. In fact, option was given that if you want to take the child with you, then also fine, and if you do not want to take the child, then no problem, then we are going to act as orphanage also, right? But please do not kill the child, right? So therefore infanticide in general for women and children इसकी heading हम कर सकते हैं. Right, orphanage was there. Then you can mention that through his what you call as if you talk about this thing, ठीक है, तो ये हुआ. ठीक है, उसके बाद next component that you can talk about is, मतलब in general you can mention that opposed child marriage, promoted widow remarriage, right? So अभी लिखना है via सत्यशोधक समाज. That was set up in 1873, 2 years before Arya Samaj, right? So in general, opposed child marriage, promoted widow remarriage, so therefore women issues they are done with. Next that you can talk about Dalits. So in 1873 he always believed in, but he's a modern politician, he's a modern social reformer, right? So he what is modern politics? A clear ideology, clear goal, clear plan, clear program, proper organization, right? So ideology, it is represented in what you call as his book Gulamgiri, right? So he highlighted in Gulamgiri that how the nexus of the colonial administration with the priestly class that results in oppression of the Dalits, right? That book is coming in 1873, but he is not focusing just on the book, just on awareness. He also wants to do reforms on the ground with the help of Satyasodhak Samaj. So therefore focus on this interconnection. That is, this thing, it represents what you call as narrative, and this thing, it represents action. And highlight this thing in your answer, that that's how he wanted to combine, right? He was not just a moderate, right? But he, in that sense, acted as a extremist, right? समझ में क्या कहना चाह रहा हूँ? A moderate is a person who focuses just on the pen, right? He's focusing on both the narrative combined with action on the ground by forming an organization in 1873 called Satyasodak Samaj, right? That is what he is doing, right? So it was Marathi book, right? It basically equated, अगर इसके बारे में और लिखना है तो it basically equated the Shudra and Ati Shudra to the slaves in United States of America. That is, he said that slavery which existed in the West, it is similar to the oppression which is suffered by Shudras and Ati Shudras, or in general you can say कि भाई Dalits, right? So therefore that's how he tried to what you call as bring attention to this particular issue, especially among the Western educated middle class, right? Then he also had this newspaper, Deen Bandhu, right, which was set up in 1877, which again raised the issues of the Dalits and other oppressed sections of the society. So fine, writings के बारे में जिक्र किया ना, so some factual information would have to be mentioned. With respect to the peasants, so he wrote a book, Cultivators Whipcord, in 1881. The key theme of this particular book was that how the his focus was Dalit peasant. As a peasant, you are any which way oppressed, irrespective of which caste you belong to. As a Dalit, you are facing caste oppression. When you are both, so therefore he said that both of these issues are intertwined, and therefore those who are Dalit peasants, they are the most oppressed among the peasants also, right? And issue which he highlighted is he attacked the priestly class. He says that the peasant is any which way poor, right? And the priestly class, it extracts money from the poor people, right? And Dalits are poorest of the poor, therefore they get oppressed. How money is extracted? In the name of life cycle rituals. Example, you had a child, right? So therefore priests, they will force you, or they will tell you, they'll make you, let's say, emotional, that you have to give some money for some ritual, otherwise you to anarth ho jayega. Right? But throughout life cycle, multiple events happen. For example, marriage happens, death also happens, all of these things, right? So therefore, festivals, right? So priest may come and they may, voluntary contribution is very, very good. But if extraction is taking place, by social pressure, then that becomes wrong, right? So therefore, voluntary contribution to festivals, no problem. But he is highlighting what you call as extraction. That is, extracts money. Right? So therefore there is a nexus, he said, between the priestly class, between the bureaucracy, and the moneylenders, etc. So who are oppressing? Moneylenders are oppressing, because he was from Maharashtra, right? So the state is extracting high land revenue. Maharashtra में कौन सा land revenue system था? Ryotwari land revenue system, whereby the Ryot became owner of the land. So his first problem is the state, that is, high land revenue is there. If he does not pay the land revenue, then the land will be taken away by the government. Second issue is that somehow if he takes loan from the money lender to pay the land revenue, then the interest rates by the money lenders are very, very high, right? So therefore this is what you call as class oppression, or this is the economic aspect which is there. And this aspect is religion based aspect or caste based aspect. So he said that religion, economic fundamentals, and colonial administration or colonial state, its focus on extraction of money from the masses. These three things are combining and leading to maximum oppression of the Dalit peasants, right? So he is focusing on that interconnection. So that was the cultivator's whip code. Apart from this solution, he also gave solution to simply education, self-reliance, land reforms, right? So solution, he talked about education. Second, he talked about land reforms. right? Third, he mentioned that the business of the money lenders, it should be brought under control. That is money lenders regulation. Right? He also talked about what you call as military should be used for rural development. Like nowadays, at times we see now that some bridge has collapsed, civil administration is not able to do anything, so therefore military people, they come and within a span of 48 hours they make the bridge. So he is giving huge amount of importance to rural poverty, and he's saying that military should be pressed into service for infrastructure development in the rural areas. That is military for rural development. Bilkul make it a #1 project, right? So these are the solutions which he is telling that it should be done, right? Land reforms, meaning shifting the land from the rich to the poor. Student says, sir, Ryotwari mein to Ryot already is owner of land, but because of high land revenue, landlessness happened, lands were auctioned. Because of high interest rate, lands were lost to the money lenders. So therefore, go to a Ryotwari area after 30 years or after 20 years, and you would see that the poor person has again become a tenant in his own land, right? So therefore, land reforms will be required. Right, so therefore that is the thought process. Right, he also opened night schools. So with respect to workers, for example, he opened night schools because din mein to kaam karenge. Similarly for the peasants also, he had opened night schools. Then there is this organization called Bombay Mill Hands Association. Its founder was what you call as Narayan Lokhande. But his co-founder was Jyotirao Phule. Right? It was set up in what you call as late 1800s or बिल्कुल early 1899 के आसपास में ये setup हुई है. So therefore, Bombay Mill Hands Association. Mills are textile mills where the workers are working. Right? So therefore, Mill Hands basically it's an organization primarily focused on the welfare of the workers of the factories. Right? So that is what he is basically doing. So that's how you answer. Right, so therefore only those students will be able to answer who have done research on the basis of current affairs, right? Otherwise standard किसी भी किताब में you pick up Bipin Chandra, you pick up Shekhar Bandyopadhyay, you pick up let's say NCERTs etc. इतना तो ये this is actually primarily based on current affairs, ठीक है? तो जो research मैंने करी वो आपके साथ मैंने share करी, right? This is the work that, and therefore we have covered different sections. Structure ऐसा रहेगा. Next question that we come towards is what you call as पोस्ट इंडिपेंडेंस इंडिया, एंड वही पता नहीं कब तक यूपीएससी रिपीट करते रहेगा एक ही चीज, अब तो बोर हो गए, ठीक है? कंसोलिडेशन आफ्टर इंडिपेंडेंस, है ना? कंसोलिडेशन आफ्टर इंडिपेंडेंस. सो क्वेश्चन नंबर 12 इज ट्रेस इंडियाज. See the word trace is there, so somewhere the focus is on a journey, right? Focus is on some kind of chronology, right? Focus is कि थोड़ा सा if not perfect chronology, कुछ तो chronological बताओ हमको, because you have to trace, right? With events, right? When the word trace is there, so therefore somewhere you have to talk about events, and events they do have dates, right? Trace India's consolidation process. During early phase of independence, तो ठीक है, मतलब that is immediately after 1947, that is consolidation post 1947. early phase है, 2000s में मत आ जाना, 70s तक भी मत जाना चाहे, early phase है, तो मोटा मोटी first 2 decades में भी, that is 50s and 60s, right? That is the focus, early phase of independence in terms of, so consolidation post 1947 at the rate in terms of polity, economy, education, and international relations. The question has clearly told you that how many words are there? 250 words, right? So therefore 1, 2, 3, 4, right? तो 4 parts, ठीक है ना? तो 4 parts है, तो 240 डिवाइड बाय 4 कितना? 60 वर्ड्स हो गया, ठीक है ना? इंट्रोडक्शन लेट्स से 10 वर्ड्स की आपने बना ली एक, ठीक है? कंक्लूजन अगर आप हटा भी देते हो तो 240 डिवाइड बाय 4 60 वर्ड्स. एक सेंटेंस में यूजुअली लेट्स से स्टूडेंट राइट्स डाउन, मतलब थोड़ा अपर लिमिट लेके चलते हैं, 10 वर्ड्स, राइट? सो देयरफॉर 6 लाइन्स, राइट? फॉर ईच ऑफ दीज यू हैव टू राइट डाउन, राइट? सम मेंटल स्ट्रक्चर शुड बी देयर. 6 लाइन्स मध्ये एट मैक्स 6 सब पॉइंट्स, at max 6 sub points, conclusion में include कर लोगे तो मोटा मोटी let's say 4 to 5 points you need to have with respect to all of these 4 things, right? So what can be the introduction? Introduction can be very, very simple, that India inherited huge amount of, you know, basically layman terms, I'm telling you that India inherited huge challenges, right? Post independence due to colonial rule of what you call as roughly, you know, 200 years, right? And they were great in the domain of polity, right, comma, economy, education, international relations also. ठीक है, ऐसा एक simple introduction करना है तो आप कर सकते हैं इसमें, right? If you talk about with respect to political consolidation, right? तो political consolidation में क्या किया हमने? The first step which was taken was that first of all focus on political consolidation began just before independence itself. Right? You can mention that British wanted to create a weak state via Cabinet Mission Plan 1946. Via Cabinet Mission Plan 1946. So British were planning that a European Union like very weak structure can be created through Cabinet Mission Plan. However, once Cabinet Mission Plan 1946 failed, after that we had to accept partition, but in return we ensured that a strong center is created via Mountbatten Plan. 3rd June Plan, right? So power was transferred to center, not to any of the province. As a result, very strong center, right? Strong center is required if you want to do any kind of consolidation, right? So that is one element. The second immediate step which was taken was focus on chronology wise agar chal rahe, then we focused on what was the first thing done in polity? Very good. So out of total 571 princely states, right, through Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel's leadership of as being the Minister of the States Department, right, which was set up on 13th of June. So therefore, out of the 571, 565 princely states through Sam, Dam, Dand, Bhed, they were made to integrate with India. And this process was completed by 1948. Including challenges sentence bana hai, so you can mention that by 1948 challenges were presented by states like Bhopal, Travancore, Manipur, Jodhpur, Hyderabad, Junagadh, J&K. However, by 1948 those problems they were resolved either through diplomacy or use of army, right? That's how you can complete the sentence. Now once you have gathered the territory, once you have gathered the UPSC syllabus, after that what? You have to look through the books and put in GS1, GS2, GS3, GS4. Reorganize, state reorganization. So State Reorganization Commission was set up in 1953. Its report came in 1955, implemented in the form of Act 1956, and this state reorganization was language-based reorganization, linguistic reorganization, right? It was linguistic reorganization, and which resulted in respecting the diversity of India. So diversity is happy smiley, thick. Obviously, if governance provider and governance recipient, if they speak the same language, then efficiency will be there. That is good governance. So regional aspirations of diversity are met and good governance is met, right? So therefore proper reorganization for two purposes: efficiency in administration and meeting the regional aspirations, right? This is how through State Reorganization Act of 1956 the political consolidation was done. Now language pe hai hum, and we know that language is very sensitive issue. So third element may, well, in 1950 itself, through the constitution, we came up with 8th schedule. It was part of the constitution, which was further complemented by Official Languages Act. ओला ओवर नहीं है, ऑफिशियल लैंग्वेज एक्ट है, ठीक है. ऑफिशियल लैंग्वेज एक्ट 1963, which basically talked about that how the center should communicate with the states and how the government work should be done, and therefore further the linguistic aspirations of different groups, it was met with the help of these two components. That is the 8th schedule, which lists out, initially it listed out 14 languages, today they are overall 22 languages, ठीक है ना. तो ऐसा ऑफिशियल लैंग्वेजेस एक्ट 1963 इस तरीके से ये चीजें हुई.
UPSC Mains demands more than just knowledge. It requires the art of presenting that knowledge clearly, concisely, and convincingly on paper. Without the right approach, even well-prepared content can fall short. You need structured guidance to overcome bottlenecks and translate your preparation into well-structured, impactful answers. Vision IS present a specially curated offline and online masterclasses for answer writing in Delhi. It offers 5 focus sessions to build strong answer writing fundamentals, craft impactful introductions and conclusions, use examples, data and illustrations effectively, practice through live demonstrations, receive personalized feedback on evaluated assignments, learn proven strategies from UPSC toppers. Attend the free orientation on 18th August, with the classes starting from 19th August at 5 p.m.
Then second you can mention, अब ये हम chronology में थोड़ा आगे निकल गए, otherwise somewhere you could have mentioned earlier that the Constitution of India came into existence on 26th of January 1950, which provided what you call as strong state, but at the same time federalism, that is federalism with unitary bias, that is quasi-federalism, right? And the state structure, right, with proper system of checks and balances is there, right? So therefore strong state with federalism is created in the Constitution of India with fundamental rights, etc. That is the political consolidation that you can talk about. Second element, if you begin with other classes, अब वो नहीं भूलना है हमने क्या क्या करना है, तो इन्होंने क्या बोला, पॉलिटी, तो पॉलिटी में उसके बाद इकोनॉमी में आ जाएंगे, ठीक है. तो इफ यू टॉक अबाउट पॉलिटी, तो well, one line you can dedicate. So with respect to tribal integration, you can mention that the Constitution of India via the 5th schedule and the 6th schedule and positive affirmative action in the form of reservation, right, in the legislature as well as in the civil services. Plus policy wise, Jawaharlal Nehru came out with tribal Panchsheel, whereby he said develop the tribals, but the tribal way as far as possible. Right, so therefore if you know tribal or you can समय बहुत कम है यहाँ पे, ठीक है ना, तो यहाँ पे सिर्फ tribal Panchsheel mention कर दोगे तो that is also good enough because we have total 4 components to talk about. But इसकी key theme थी that develop the tribal, modernize the tribal, but while respecting their way of life. Right, so therefore tribals are very very important part. So that's the polity. What was the second component? Second component was related to economy, है ना. तो क्या बोला कि पॉलिटी इकोनॉमी. सो इफ वी टॉक अबाउट इकोनॉमी, तो इकोनॉमी में द नंबर थिंग विच वाज डन वाज 5-year प्लानिंग. सो 2 elements are there. One is 5-year plans. So planning commission was set up, right, in 1950, and then it resulted in first 5-year plan, right, 1951. So therefore because resources were less and goals of developments were very very high, right, so therefore we went for planned development with assistance from USSR. Second thing, because industrialization of India was not done, so strong private sector was not there in India. But if we have to achieve industrialization, so who has the money? Private sector does not have the money. Who has the money? Government, right? So therefore, we went for mixed economy. Right? There you can mention mixed economy, and the reason is this, which I just told you, because who will do the investment? Right? So therefore, we went for mixed economy. Then immediately we went for zamindari abolition also, that is we went for land reforms. Because agriculture sector is very important part of economy. So therefore we went for zamindari abolition, and it was done by provinces. Because agriculture is state list of subject, that's why there was no one central government level law, there was what you call as different governments. Immediately after independence, they brought bills, and therefore UP, for example, brought Zamindari Abolition and Land Reforms Act in 1950, and other states also. So therefore, focus on land reforms is also happening. So agriculture sector we have covered, industrial sector we have covered, service sector to bahut baad mein hai. So therefore, this is the focus which is there, right? After that, post economy, the third was education, right? In the domain of education, first of all, the Constitution of India 1950, it basically through DPSPs. Right to education was not given, but 3 DPSPs are there, I think 41, 45 and 43 or something, right? Whereby focus is what? In the DPSP, the Constitution basically tells the state that please focus on these things, right? So DPSCs for that the state should focus on right to education, universal education, प्राइमरी एजुकेशन अप टिल 14 ईयर्स ऑफ एज, राइट? तो ये कोई अधिकार नहीं है, बट डीपीएस में बोला गया सरकार को कि कोशिश करें कि ये अधिकार सबको मिल पाए. ट्राई टू एंश्योर दैट राइट टू एजुकेशन इज अवेलेबल टू ऑल, राइट, अप टिल 14 ईयर्स ऑफ एज. सो देयरफॉर दैट इज द फोकस व्हिच इज देयर, राइट? देन second component with respect to education is we focused, because we are having challenge of industrialization, we need to do IR, right? Industrial revolution, industrialization. Therefore, focus is on creation of IITs, select IITs, right? Later on, select IIMs, right? Plus one aims in Delhi, so that high quality workforce is available for the industrial, limited industrial sector that we are trying to have, right? So therefore, focus was on mass education through DPSP's example you can mention, and then the focus is on higher education, right? That is what you can talk about. And lastly, we have international relations. So you mentioned the challenge that in a way World War II never ended. As soon as World War II ended, there was Cold War, and therefore India followed the policy of NAM, right? NAM policy was institutionalized. Policy तो हम पहले से ही follow कर रहे थे, but it was institutionalized in 1961 when actually an organization like NAM was formed. And reason for it, we wanted to focus on development. We did not want to become a theater for the capitalist superpower US and communist superpower USSR to fight against each other, right? So therefore, we focused on NAM. We tried to what you call as balance this thing out, right, with the international relations. That is, focus is on development. Example, we are open to US help, plus we are taking help of USSR for 5-year plans, right, for technology and for other things, right? So therefore, that is the focus with respect to international relations. And ये question ऐसे answer होगा. We have overshot the time by 10 minutes, but ठीक है, एक last है, French Revolution relevance today, right? The question is simple, that how the French Revolution is relevant in contemporary times also. That is question number 13. The French Revolution has enduring relevance to the contemporary world. Explain. Again, this time UPSC has not asked the student to counter UPSC. UPSC is told that this statement is true, elaborate. Right? That is the pattern which we see in all of the questions that we have discussed so far. Right? So, basically the question is very, very simple. That is relevance today. Contemporary world today. Okay? So how many words? You have to answer in 250 words. So how can structure it? The thought process is very, very simple. If you know the consequences of the French Revolution 1789, then you need to find that whether those consequences are of importance today also, right? So how we can think about it? So we can say that in French Revolution was an important pivot in foundation of the modern world, at the rate society, economy, polity, right? And it had long lasting ramifications. So simple introduction हो गया, कोई उसमें problem नहीं है. If you think about the consequences of the French Revolution, then first of all, within the domain of polity, what is the first ramification? First ramification is that it was the first republic. Mistake which will be done by the student in this answer will be focus only on the consequence and neglecting the tough part of the question, that is its relation with the contemporary world, right? So therefore, first republic, that is France, right? 1792, that was the result. So today, what is the consequence? Consequence, you can talk about Arab Spring. That how stable democracies, how democracies have proved to be much more stable, and when monarchies were there, right, or whenever democracy was under threat. So therefore, Arab Spring ke through, be it in Tunisia, be it in Iraq or Libya or other countries in early 2000s, the people came out on the streets and they either overthrew the monarchies or they overthrew the corrupt regimes. Therefore, the idea that it should be a genuine republic, that is relevant today also, otherwise it will lead to chaos. That is one of the aspect. Second aspect, you can mention color revolutions, and that is also happening in early 2000s only. For example, orange revolution in the case of Ukraine, tulip revolution in the case of Kyrgyzstan, right? ऐसे एक rose revolution हुई थी, I think it was in Georgia, yes, early 2000s, right? There also the issue was same, that when dysfunctional state was there, so people came out on the streets and they tried to establish a genuine republic, right? But another relevance of this is there, that it was not just first republic, it was also first unstable republic also. It was first, मतलब first republic in Europe है ये, मतलब मैं यूरोप की बात कर रहा हूँ, ठीक है वो, ठीक है, but it was the first unstable republic in Europe also, right? How? For example, in 1792 republic बनी and reign of terror 1792-94. And why that happened? Because as soon as France became republic, the rest of the European monarchs, they attacked France because they wanted to restore monarchy, because they thought of democracy as coronavirus. That means the republic could not be stable in 1792 because of external interference. And well, my friends, because of external interference, the republics which are set up in Tunisia, Iraq, Libya, right, Central Asia, they were also all unstable. So therefore, relevance of learnings of French Revolution is there, that all of these that like France, comma, because of external intervention or because of external interference, these are also unstable revolutions, right? So like France, because of external interference, here also instability was there. आज के टाइम पे कोई functional democracy नहीं है, because somewhere France के केस में तो फिर भी genuine था, in cases में तो it was manufactured revolution in many of the cases. Second element with respect to polity is that it gave the concept of nation. That is, nation is not territory, nation is people, right, who feel one, equal and supreme, right? So therefore it has great ramification. For example, if nation is supreme, then in polity there has to be democracy. If nation is supreme, that means in the domain of society also nation is supreme, and nation is what? People. That means there has to be equality. No birth-based positives, no birth-based negatives. If nation is supreme in the domain of economy, then how there can be concentration of wealth, forced concentration of wealth among the elites, right? So there has to be what you call as security of property available to all, right? So therefore these principles, they are relevant today also, right? Then further, if you talk about another element was they came up with the concept of written constitution in Europe. US में तो खैर पहले से ही था, right? So therefore the idea of written constitution is reaffirmed. Plus majorly they codified the civil law and the criminal law in the form of Napoleonic codes, right? And well, this meant institutionalization of the best practices, and this Napoleonic code inspired similar codes in rest of the countries. For example, today also when we have Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, Bharatiya Nyaya Suraksha Sanhita, Bharatiya Sakshya Sanhita, so therefore they are inspired with the idea that we should continue to ensure that the civil and criminal laws, they are what you call as codified. Then they came out with romance, that is rights of man and citizen, right? And which basically continues to inspire the Constitution of India and constitutions of the other countries. It continues to inspire, for example, the UN Charter, right? And therefore, today also, when there are what you call it, when there is terrorism, when there is unstable polity, dysfunctional democracies in many parts of the world, so therefore human rights concern becomes very, very important concern, right? So therefore relevance is still there in terms of rights. Then they also established a secular state. So what is the relevance today? ISIS. ISIS was able to establish its state over a large territory, right? And therefore the threat to secularism exists today also, and therefore we should always ensure that the states which are there, they act in a secular manner, right? Then because of reign of terror, which existed from 1792 till 1794, what do we learn? That republic bana dena is not just good enough. System of checks and balances are also very, very important, because power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? So therefore in today's time also, wherever system of checks and balances are diluted, there it can lead to negative consequences, right? Example, the unstable dictatorial setups which exist in Africa or Central Asia, right? Or existed and continue to exist in Syria, right? So therefore this is how you can mention that if system of checks and balances is not there, then human rights and other things, they will come into. Then there are learnings for geopolitics also. And what is the learning? Well, immediately after the French Revolution, there was 23 years of war from 1792 till 1815. Why? Because of external interference. Because of external interference. And therefore this is of relevance today also, that external meddling can destabilize not just the polity of one country, society of one country, but the whole continent also, or the whole region also, right? So therefore we should remain vigilant with respect to external interference, right? Then we also saw that the first wave of decolonization happened. Where it happened in Europe, it happened in Central America, and it happened in South America, right? In Europe, Greece became independent from Ottoman Empire in 1832. Belgium became independent from Netherlands, right? Netherlands. Belgium became independent from Netherlands around 1839. 1830s May, these two became independent, right? Similarly, in Central America, Haiti became independent from France itself in 1804. In South America, Ecuador, Venezuela, Bolivia, Colombia, Peru. In North America, Mexico became independent, right? These are from Spain. Brazil became independent from Portuguese, right? So the first wave of decolonization happened here. But are these countries very stable countries, right? Later on, right? So what is the net nishkarsh? The net nishkarsh is, what we learn from here, that only political independence is not enough. Only political independence is not enough. What is required is economic self-reliance. Till the point of time economic self-reliance will not be there, then any kind of decolonization, any kind of republic will not be able to be stable. That is the learning that we have today, right? So therefore economic viability becomes very, very important if you want to have true democracy, true independence, right? So that is how it is. Then at the rate economy, khatam kar raha hoon bas. In the domain of economy, what did we learn? That first of all, land reforms were initiated in France. That is, lands were taken away from nobility and clergy and they were given to the actual cultivator, right? So what do we come to learn from this? We come to learn that if there will be inequity if there'll be very high inequity in the society, then it can lead to what you call as instability for any state. That is the learning. Primary grievance was economic grievance in the case of the French Revolution. इस वजह से हमेशा हमें सतर्क रहना है, विजिल रहना है that yes, market competition should be there, but such level of concentration of wealth should not happen that ultimately it hurts the larger national interest, right? Throughout the world, in domestic country also, domestic polity also. And that's why in today's society, yes, we should have MNCs, but we should also have very strong MSMEs. Right? That was agrarian economy. This is industrialized economy and service sector led economy. Right? What was landlord back then can be equated with multinational company today. And what was Riot back then can be equated roughly with, let's say, MSMEs today. Right? So yes, MNCs are very, very important for nation's power, right? Overall for the world. But MSMEs are also extremely important. Otherwise, it can lead to inequity, which can lead to instability. Right? So therefore, that becomes very, very important. Another thing that we learn in the domain of economy, if you look at the Constitution of France, which was there in 1791, the first constitution established constitutional monarchy, it said that yes, there should be right to property, but that property can be taken away in larger public interest. Right? So therefore, this idea that yes, there should be right to property, but larger national interest can allow. And today, what is the relevance? Relevance today is that today there are many countries which are poor, which are developing, and therefore such kind of principle that yes, right to property hona chahiye, but in the larger national interest, if land acquisition has to be done, then that should also be allowed. Example, in the case of India also, initially it was fundamental right, then we converted right to property to legal right, because legal rights, they can be infringed in the larger national interest relatively easily. Right? So therefore, that is the learning which we have. Another thing that we got to know, that workers, they were working class, did not get real benefits after the French Revolution. And as a result, what happened? Therefore, socialism and later Marxism, right? They developed, and well, Marxism and socialism, they threatened political stability. ये भी कोई दूध के धुले नहीं है, right? There was working class actually did not benefit, but ultimately what happened? This socialism versus Marxism rivalry, it is contributing to what you call as Cold War ultimately, right? What is the learning? Learning is केक कटेगा तो संबे बटेगा, अगर नहीं बटेगा तो बम फटेगा. समझ लो? That is the learning. Learning is very, very simple, that social equity becomes very, very important, because when that was not followed, right, then it resulted in this kind of scenario, right? Similarly, for example, one of the negative was, for example, for women, right to vote was not given, and this resulted in what you call as feminist movement. तो बिल्कुल ठीक लॉन्च हुआ, and therefore again equity very, very important. So therefore we learn from the positives of the French Revolution also, and try to have those positives in contemporary times, and they are of relevance, right? And we learn from the failures of the French Revolution also, and so that we do not repeat the mistakes of the past, right? So therefore this is how you can mention, right? Example, all of this inequity, it resulted in what? एक और learning आप कह सकते हो कि the chaos which followed. Example, 23 years of war. इस point को ऊपर भी डाल सकते हो. Chaos which followed because of the French Revolution and this 23 years of wars, it prevented industrial revolution in France until 1870. The chaos which followed, भाई American Revolution हो गया 1783 में, and industrial revolution began in United States of America from 1783 onwards. Right? मतलब ऐसा थोड़ा बहुत तो start हुआ, picked pace after 1865. ठीक है, they were busy in something else. Why the industrial revolution did not begin in France despite arrival of capitalism after French Revolution? Because 23 years you are fighting wars, and there are some other consequences. 1830s में people were on the streets, 1848 में people were on the streets. The whole point is that stability is very, very important. Therefore, what is the learning? Learning is stability is very, very important for growth in today's time, right? So therefore, in the world, if there are chaos in the form of Israel versus Palestine issue, if issue Russia versus Ukraine issue is taking place, then the world cannot develop, right? And therefore this is a big lesson, and that's why the conflicts in different parts of the world, they need to be resolved ASAP in a peaceful manner, so that overall more and more people of the world, they can have better economic security and better economic life, right? So therefore these are the learnings from the French Revolution. अब मैंने बता दिया, ठीक है? अब इसमें से कितने वर्ड्स करने हैं वो उसको 250 वर्ड्स है, वैसे हमने कहा था रफली 3 to 4 पॉइंट्स फॉर एवरी दिस थिंग इट इज देयर, तो दैट इज हाउ इट इज, है ना? सारे हो गए ना? हाँ ठीक है, ठीक है, तो दैट इज हाउ इट इज. गॉड ब्लेस यू, टेक केयर, बाय बाय.